8 tips to grow big bushy basil plants that most people overlook. Hello, dear growers. Welcome back to Earthly Delights, where small spaces become green sanctuaries and tiny seeds bloom into daily joy. If you're here, chances are you've got a soft spot for houseplants, kitchen herbs, or maybe even a container garden perched on a sunlit windowsill. You might be someone who lovingly wipes the dust off each leaf. Or maybe you're still wondering why your basil keeps growing tall and scraggly instead of lush and leafy like those Pinterest-perfect photos. Whether you're a beginner with a few pots or a passionate green thumb managing a balcony jungle, you're in exactly the right place. Because today, I'm going to let you in on something special: 8 tried and true tips to grow big, bushy, vibrant basil plants. Not the kind that sulks after a week on your counter. We're talking about the kind of basil that turns heads and fills your kitchen with that sweet, unmistakable scent of summer. Stick with me, because some of these tips most growers never hear, and once you try them, you'll never look at basil the same way again. And hey, if this kind of content speaks to your gardening soul, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. Your green journey deserves all the support it can get. 1. Pick the right basil for your space. Now let's begin where most basil stories actually go wrong, from the very first decision: which basil to grow. You see, most people walk into a nursery or grocery store and instinctively reach for the classic Genovese basil. And there's a reason for that: it's bold, fragrant, and perfect for pesto. But here's what many indoor growers and small space gardeners don't realize: not all basil types are created equal. Especially when you're working with limited sunlight, airflow, or pot space. If your growing area is a sunny windowsill, a small balcony, or even a cramped kitchen counter, your basil needs to match that lifestyle. That's why compact or bush basil varieties like Greek basil or spicy globe are absolute gems. They stay naturally tidy, don't flop over as they grow, and they thrive in containers. They're also beautifully ornamental, with tiny leaves and a rounded shape that looks stunning in decorative pots. On the other hand, if you're looking to impress your dinner guests or elevate your home cooking, consider the lemon basil or Thai basil varieties. These bring not only unique flavor profiles to your meals, but also fascinating textures and colors to your indoor garden. Imagine the look on your friends' faces when they see vibrant purple stems or catch a citrusy aroma from across the room. And if you're someone who loves a pop of color, don't miss red Reuben or dark opal basil. These varieties don't just taste great, they make your space feel like a living art gallery. So before you plant your first seed or repot that store-bought basil, ask yourself, what do I want from this plant? Is it flavor, fragrance, beauty, or all of the above? Because once you choose the right variety, everything else, growth, care, even harvesting, becomes a whole lot easier. Up next, we'll explore how to start your basil successfully, whether from seed, cutting, or a bunch from the grocery store. You might be surprised how forgiving this plant can be, with the right start. 2. Seed, store-bought, or propagate? You've got options, now that you've chosen the perfect basil variety for your space and style. The next question naturally arises: how do you actually get started? Do you plant seeds? Buy a baby basil from the store? Or maybe, rescue a sad-looking bunch from your kitchen counter and give it a second life? The good news is, basil is one of the most forgiving herbs you can grow. And in this part of the journey, I want to walk you through 3 different, and equally rewarding, ways to start your basil, no matter your gardening experience or setup. Let's begin with seeds. If you've never sown anything before, basil is a great place to start. The seeds are tiny, like poppy seeds, and they don't ask for much, just a warm environment, a sprinkle of soil, and a bit of daily care. They love gentle moisture and warmth, so a sunny window or heat mat under a seed tray can work wonders. Within days, you'll see those first little green shoots. And trust me, there's nothing quite like that feeling of new life pushing through soil. It's grounding, it's exciting, it's the start of something special. But maybe you don't have the time or patience to wait for seeds to germinate. That's perfectly okay. Many indoor gardeners, and busy city dwellers, prefer to start with seedlings from a nursery or grocery store. And here's where things get interesting. Most of those little basil pots are packed with 10, 12, sometimes 15 seedlings all crammed together. It may look lush and full, but this crowding can actually lead to stunted growth, yellowing leaves, and early death. Here's the pro move. Gently separate the seedlings and give each one its own pot or planting spot. Even if you're growing indoors, spacing makes all the difference. A single, uncrowded plant will almost always grow bigger and healthier than a tangled bunch left to struggle in a shared pot. It's a small step, but it can completely change your results. And then there's the third, often overlooked method: propagating basil from cut stems. Yes, that's right, you can take a fresh bunch of basil from the grocery store, snip off the ends, and pop those stems into a glass of water. Within a week or two, you'll see delicate white roots curling downward like threads of hope. Once the roots are strong enough, just pot them up, and voila! You've created a whole new plant without ever touching a seed packet. Each method, seeds, store-bought starts, or propagation, has its charm. What matters most is finding the one that fits your lifestyle, your patience, and your goals. Because no matter where you begin, what matters is that you do begin. And trust me, your basil will thank you. In the next part, we're going to talk about something deceptively simple but absolutely essential: giving your basil room to breathe. You may not think airflow matters much indoors, but wait till you see what it can do for your plant's health and happiness. 3. Give it room to breathe. So, you've picked your basil variety. You've planted your seeds or rescued a handful of cuttings from the grocery store. Maybe you've even placed your tiny green starts near the window, ready for them to grow into something full and thriving. But here's the truth most new growers overlook: basil isn't just about sunshine and water. It's about space. Imagine trying to grow in a crowded elevator. No air, no room to stretch. That's exactly what basil feels when it's crammed into a pot with too many neighbors. It might survive for a while, but it won't thrive, and thriving is what we're after. Basil is a heat-loving, sun-chasing plant, yes, but it also loves air. Not wind, not constant blasts of AC, but that soft, invisible rhythm of air circulation that keeps its leaves dry and its stems strong. Without it, your plant is far more likely to suffer from fungal problems, root rot, or mildew, issues that start subtly but can ruin your harvest before it ever really begins. So what can you do? The first step is surprisingly simple: give your basil space. Indoors, that means only one plant per small pot, preferably 4 to 6 inches wide for a single stem. Outdoors or in a raised bed, space them about 6 to 12 inches apart. This allows for airflow between the leaves, lets sunlight hit every part of the plant, and gives the roots the elbow room they need to dig deep and grow strong. And here's something else: spacing also affects flavor. Stressed, overcrowded basil tends to produce bitter or tough leaves, but a relaxed plant, growing with ease, produces the soft, fragrant, sweet greens we all love to cook with. You might even start to notice a rhythm: how basil stretches toward the light, how it opens its leaves more freely when it's not pressed up against others. It becomes easier to spot when it's happy, and easier to correct when it's not. This is where you begin to develop a kind of relationship with your plant. It's not just about watering it when the soil feels dry. It's about noticing, adjusting, giving it the space, not just to survive, but to shine. And in just a moment, we'll talk about the single most transformative habit you can develop with your basil: how you harvest it. Because if you've been picking your basil the way most people do, you might be stopping it from becoming bushy without even realizing it. 4. The harvest trick that triggers bushiness. Here's the part most basil lovers never get told, the part that could mean the difference between a lanky, disappointing plant and a lush, bushy basil explosion you can harvest all season long. Because let's be honest, if you've grown basil before, you've probably done this: reached for a few leaves at the top, gently plucked them off, and walked away thinking you did the right thing. But what if I told you that move, however well-intentioned, is actually holding your basil back from becoming the plant of your dreams? Basil doesn't just grow up, it branches out. But it only does that when we ask it to. And the way we ask is by harvesting not the leaves, but the stems. Let me explain. When you pick individual leaves from the top or sides, the plant continues growing straight up, often getting leggy and top-heavy. But when you pinch or cut the stem just above a pair of leaf nodes, the plant sees it as a signal, a command, even to send out 2 new branches from that exact spot. It's like telling the plant, "Hey, let's multiply." And it listens. This trick is what makes a single basil stem transform into a thick, full, bushy shape. Every time you harvest with intention, you're not reducing the plant, you're training it. You're shaping it like a small tree, where each pruning leads to more branches, more leaves, and ultimately, more basil than you ever thought one plant could produce. Here's how to do it. Look down the stem until you find a set of strong, healthy leaves. Then, about a 1/4 inch above that set, make your cut. Use clean scissors or simply pinch with your fingers. Do this every time your basil has grown 2 to 3 sets of leaves on a new branch. Before long, you'll have a plant that no longer grows up, but out, filling your pot or raised bed like a soft green fountain. And the best part? The more you harvest this way, the more your basil thrives. It's one of those rare cases in life where taking more actually gives you more in return. So next time you approach your basil plant, don't just pick, partner with it. Use your hands not just to harvest, but to guide, to shape, to encourage. Coming up, we'll tackle a challenge every basil grower faces eventually, the dreaded flower spike. It seems harmless at first, but left unchecked, it can ruin the flavor and end your harvest early. 5. Stop the flower. Save the flavor. Just when your basil plant starts looking its best, full, leafy, and finally thriving, something sneaky begins to happen. Almost overnight, you notice the leaves getting smaller, tighter, more clustered at the top. Then, right in the center, a little spike begins to rise like a crown. That's not a new leaf. It's a flower bud. Now, don't get me wrong, basil flowers are beautiful, delicate, white or purple, and often a magnet for pollinators. But here's the thing. Once basil starts to flower, it changes everything. The plant shifts its energy from producing those tender, fragrant leaves we love, to reproduction. In other words, the moment it begins to flower, your basil decides it's done growing leaves. And the result? The flavor turns bitter, the growth slows, the lushness fades. But here's the good news, you can stop it. And it's easier than you think. The secret is timing. Once you spot the first signs of flowering, a tightening cluster of tiny leaves at the top, it's your cue to act. Don't wait, don't hesitate. Simply pinch off the developing flower before it blooms. Do this regularly, and your basil will stay focused on leafy growth, not on going to seed. But let's say you missed the sign. It happens to all of us. One day you're busy, the next day you come back to find a full flower in bloom. Don't panic, you can still bring your basil back. Here's how. Cut it back hard. Find the last strong set of leaves well below the flower stalk, and prune the plant just above that spot. It might feel harsh, but this kind of reset tells the basil, we're not done yet. And more often than not, it will respond by pushing out new leafy growth from those lower nodes. And here's a pro tip many gardeners overlook. When basil starts to flower, it's also a signal to start your next generation. Whether it's early summer or late spring, this is your reminder to sow more seeds or prepare new cuttings. That way, while one plant begins to retire, its successor is already rising behind the scenes. So yes, flowering might seem like the end, but it can also be a beginning. A fresh chance to expand your basil family. Keep the flavors coming, and maintain that lush green energy in your kitchen or balcony garden. Next, we'll step into a different kind of transformation, the kind that starts right in your grocery cart. Because believe it or not, that potted basil plant you grabbed in a rush? It might just be your next garden success story. 6. Grocery store basil makeover. We've all been there. You're strolling through the produce section, and then you see it. A pot of basil, lush and green, sitting under the fluorescent lights like a promise. You grab it without thinking, imagining homemade pasta and fresh caprese salads. But within a week or two, it's wilting, leaves are yellowing, and suddenly, it's more compost than culinary joy. But here's something most people don't realize. That grocery store basil can thrive. It just needs a proper introduction to real life. You see, most store-bought basil is grown for appearance, not endurance. Those full pots are actually jam-packed with dozens of tiny seedlings, all sharing one cramped space. Fighting for light, nutrients, and a breath of fresh air. It's like trying to raise a forest in a teacup. But with a little love and some strategic care, you can turn that overcrowded basil into several healthy, bushy plants. The first step? Gently separate the seedlings. It may feel intimidating at first, like you're performing surgery, but trust me, your basil wants this. Remove the whole root ball from the pot and slowly tease the roots apart, dividing the mass into individual stems or small clumps. If you're growing indoors, repot each one into its own container with fresh, well-draining soil. If you're growing outside, space them out generously in your garden bed or raised container. Give each new plant a solid drink of water, a spot with bright light, and a few days to adjust, and watch what happens. That scraggly grocery store pot turns into a thriving basil army. And if you didn't grab the potted kind, but instead picked up a bunch of basil stems tied together like a bouquet, don't worry, there's magic in that too. Take a few of the healthiest stems, snip the bottom ends at a clean angle, and place them in a glass of water. Within a week or so, roots will begin to grow. Once those roots are about 2 inches long, plant them in soil, and you'll have new basil plants, grown entirely from leftovers. This method is one of my favorite ways to reduce waste and expand your indoor garden for free. It's also deeply satisfying to watch something most people discard turn into something vibrant and alive. So next time you're tempted by that glossy basil in the store, go ahead and take it home. Just don't treat it like a finished product, treat it like a beginning. Coming up next, we'll talk about a topic that's often overlooked but absolutely vital if you want non-stop leafy growth: feeding your basil the right way. 7. Feed the leaves, not just the soil. By now, your basil has the right variety, the right space, the right start, and it's likely beginning to show you what it can really do. But if you've ever had a plant that looked great for a while, then suddenly stalled, turned pale, or just seemed tired, it's probably missing something essential. Because here's the quiet truth about lush, leafy herbs: they're hungry. Basil isn't a diva, but it is a doer, and like all doers, it needs fuel. Every new leaf it pushes out, every stem it branches, comes at a cost, and if the soil doesn't provide what it needs, growth slows, leaves yellow, and the flavor weakens. So let's talk about feeding, the kind that supports the whole plant, from roots to tip. First, understand that basil is a leafy green, which means it craves nitrogen. Nitrogen is the nutrient that tells plants to grow tall, strong, and vibrant on top, but you don't need to go hunting for fancy synthetic fertilizers. In fact, some of the best feeding options are gentle, natural, and even homemade. A diluted compost tea or worm casting mix can give your basil a gentle boost every couple of weeks. Fish emulsion is another favorite among herb growers, though I'll admit, it's a bit pungent for indoor setups. If you're growing inside, try a balanced organic liquid fertilizer with a good nitrogen to phosphorus ratio. Something like 5:3:3 or the 5th of May 10. But here's where it gets really personal. Feeding isn't just about nutrients, it's about observation. Look at your basil. Does it seem eager and deep green? Great, keep doing what you're doing. But if the leaves start to fade to yellow, or the new growth feels weak or limp, that's your plant asking for more. On the other hand, if it grows fast but the leaves turn dark and slightly curled, you might be giving too much. It's a dance, not a formula. And don't forget the roots. Healthy roots absorb healthy food. Make sure your soil drains well and isn't compacted, especially in containers. Overwatering can leach nutrients out faster than you can replace them. So always check the moisture before feeding again. Think of feeding as part of a conversation with your basil. You're not just dumping nutrients, you're offering support, encouragement, a little nudge to say, keep going, you've got this. And when you get it right, the rewards come fast. Bigger leaves, brighter color, stronger aroma, and an endless supply of fresh basil that doesn't just grow, it thrives. In the final section, we're going to look at the one piece of this puzzle that ties it all together: not a tool, not a fertilizer, but a habit, a rhythm, a way of showing up for your plant that transforms not just how it grows, but how you grow alongside it. 8. Your basil routine: watering. rotating, and talking to your plant. At this stage, you might feel like you've cracked the code. Your basil is healthy, bushy, and green. But here's something I've learned after years of growing herbs indoors and out. Success isn't just about what you do once, it's about what you do consistently. That's why this final part is all about rhythm. Not a checklist, not a strict schedule, but a gentle, intuitive routine you can build into your everyday life. A way of caring that becomes second nature. Let's start with the heartbeat of plant care, watering. It sounds simple, but basil is particular. It doesn't like soggy soil, nor does it enjoy long droughts. The key is balance. Let the top inch of soil dry out before watering again. Stick your finger in the soil, feel it. Let the plant teach you what it needs. If the leaves droop slightly but perk back up after watering, you're in tune. Now let's talk rotation. If your basil lives on a windowsill or patio, chances are it leans toward the light, stretching, reaching, always growing in one direction. Over time, that can create an unbalanced plant. A simple solution? Turn the pot a quarter turn every few days. It's like giving your basil a chance to stretch in all directions. Building even strength and encouraging that full, rounded shape. And then, yes, this one might sound strange, but hear me out. Talk to your plant. Not in a mystical, magic spell kind of way, but in the way you might talk to a pet, a baby, or even yourself when you need a little encouragement. Studies show that the carbon dioxide in your breath can benefit your plants. But more than that, it's about presence. When you slow down, check in, and speak words of care, you're connecting. And believe it or not, plants respond to presence. They thrive under attention, even silent, steady attention. This final step isn't about fertilizer or sunlight. It's about relationship. You're not just a gardener. You're a steward, a partner, a witness to the unfolding of life in real time, right there on your windowsill. So build your basil routine. Water with care, rotate with awareness, speak, observe, respond. Because in the end, it's not just about growing a better basil plant. It's about growing yourself, more present, more patient, more attuned to the quiet rhythms of life that surround us. Even in something as simple as a leaf. From seed to sanctuary, your basil breakthrough. And here we are, back where we started, with a question that brought you to this video. How do you grow basil that's not just big, but bountiful, beautiful, and bursting with life? By now, you know it's not one secret trick. It's a journey, a series of small, intentional choices that add up to something extraordinary. You picked the right variety for your space. You chose a starting method that fit your rhythm, whether from seed, stem, or store shelf. You gave your basil room to breathe, taught it to branch through mindful harvesting, and caught the flower before it stole the flavor. You even learned how to feed it, not just with fertilizer, but with awareness. And in the end, you built a rhythm, a relationship. One that isn't rooted in perfection, but in care. One that reflects something deeper than gardening. A kind of inner cultivation. Because growing basil, like growing anything worthwhile, teaches us patience. It teaches us observation. It invites us to slow down, pay attention, and respond to what we see, not with panic, but with presence. If your basil still feels small, or if your last plant didn't make it, don't see that as failure. See it as part of the rhythm. Growth isn't linear, and neither is learning. What matters is that you're showing up, plant by plant, day by day. And if no one's told you this yet, you're doing great. So whether your basil ends up in a summer salad, a jar of homemade pesto, or simply as a sweet, green presence on your windowsill, know that you've already done something powerful. You've created life, nurtured it, and grown alongside it. Thank you for spending this time with me here at Earthly Delights. If this video helped you feel more connected, more confident, or simply more curious about the green world around you, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Tell me in the comments, what kind of basil are you growing? What tip surprised you most? Let's keep this growing journey alive, together. Until next time, stay rooted, stay kind, and keep tending your corner of the earth.